Welcome back to the RMG Game of the Year Awards for 2012. Now it's time to talk about the game that gained just enough votes to be in 5th place, Final Fantasy XIII-2. This was one of the first major releases of 2012, coming out at the end of January. I actually purchased the collector's edition of the game, and you can see an unboxing video over at the RMG Classics channel. This game actually received fairly mixed reviews and reactions from the gaming media as well as the overall gaming community. Now let's take a look at some of the aspects of the game and why we still believe that it was one of the best games of the year. But be warned, spoilers are ahead. Alright, first up, let's talk about the game story. The plot in Final Fantasy XIII-1 was very linear, while also completely and utterly confusing. For most of the game, you have no idea what you're doing. You're just walking forward and killing all the monsters in sight, and that was that. Occasionally, you would trigger a cutscene and fight a boss that you couldn't beat, so you'd have to grind for hours, and then try again. 13.2 changes up the formula just a little bit in the idea that this time, you are able to travel freely throughout the 13.2 timeline. We can go back and do optional bosses or retry the story events from a different perspective, considering how much powerful you will be in comparison to your first time through. Your actions can also completely change the timeline and create an alternate timeline that you can also explore on the main menu. While the story is no longer as linear, it's still kind of confusing, especially for people who didn't play the first game. Luckily, if you pay close enough attention, you'll be able to figure out the pieces to the puzzle as the story unfolds in front of you. However, the biggest flaw comes at the end of the game. Once again, I warn you to turn back and stop watching this video if you have not seen the end of the game. Anyway, at the end of the game, you beat the bad guy, Caius, and it seems like everything's working out well, until suddenly Sarah just drops dead, and the timeline becomes permanently messed up. The real world mixes with Valhalla, and Caius is all like, ah ha 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 ha, you killed the goddess because you killed me. But instead of possibly getting one last level, with a true final boss or something, the game instead gives us a nice to be continued. Even all the alternate endings and DLC levels don't properly explain what happened at the end. Hopefully the upcoming final game in the series, Lightning Returns, will finally shed some light on the events at the end of the game and finally clear up the confusing plot. Next up we have gameplay, which is almost exactly like the first games except for one major difference. You only get 2 actual main party members instead of 3 or 4. Sarah and Noel, and that will never change. You might get a guest party member for a certain part of the game, but it's never a permanent thing. To make up for that, the game actually lets you acquire a crystal of the monster you may have just defeated, and you can add that monster to your party and develop its moveset and strength level depending on what items you give it in the crystarium. Some of the DLC even adds some actual former party members like Saz and Lightning as these, quote, monsters, meaning you can get plenty of powerful party members, but only if you pay. Not to say that some of the monsters in the game are weak by any means, some of them are actually insanely good. But doesn't that sound a little familiar though? A little like Pokemon maybe? Either way, I really enjoyed this new system and thought it added a little bit of depth to battles. But besides that, battles are really still straightforward. You encounter enemies, the game will suggest your attacks, or if you have the time, you can pick them and then decide what enemy you're going to attack yourself, and you just go at it. All the different paradigms still in the game, like Commander, Ravager, etc. And you can still set different party paradigms and change them in mid-battle with the simple push of a button. Exploring is also still the same. You just kind of walk around, attack enemies, find allies, pick up items, progress the story. But you know what they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If anything, 13.2 falls flat in terms of character development and the overall plot itself. The gameplay is fine, the premise is fine, but it's more of the same characters with hardly any interesting new ones. Noel seemed interesting at first, but once you see that his past was kind of, well, boring in my opinion, and someone described it as stupid and unappealing, you realize that the characters didn't really change at all from the end of the first game. Even Sarah ends up becoming useless, and the whole point of saving the timeline and Lightning becomes a complete waste of not only the character's time, but yours as well. With all that aside, I still enjoyed the game, and I like that the series is still trying new things and continuing to constantly evolve. Even though a lot of people don't like change, they just want the old games, and that's fine. You know, if you like the old games, go play them. But what you need to understand is that this series, much like Resident Evil, is constantly changing and evolving, and if you don't like it, then don't play it. Just play all of your oldies, and like Final Fantasy 6, Final Fantasy 7, 8, etc. Either way, 13-2 was just solid enough to get 5th place, and despite what everyone really says about it, it's a good game, and I recommend you guys check it out when you get the chance. Alright, now let's see what some other RMG members thought about the game. Harry said, "Personally, I liked the improvements on the gameplay. Definitely it felt faster and more, well, how do I say, focused this time around, and the score I thought was pretty sweet. I also liked the fact that it had a smaller main cast than the first one, and had more overall likable characters in the first one, even though Snow was still an idiot." Alright, that wraps up this one, and up next is slot number 4. Stay tuned.